Hey, everybody. So yesterday was announcement mode. Today is fun because it's ideas mode. I love ideas mode. Again, I'm Paul Hinze. I'm the director of Terraform at HashiCorp. I skipped past the title slide. Can we go back to the title slide? The title is very good. Terraform is changing the world. This is probably the best part of the talk, this title. You got to spend some time with it, and you're like, oh, yeah, there's some layers there. Really, once I came up with the title, I felt like I should be done. I was like, this is good. This is, like, we can just stand here for 20 minutes and just appreciate it. OK, cool. So I was at a family reunion recently. And at family reunions, like at parties, you get to practice the varying levels of describing what it is that you do. And in this industry, it's very difficult. You have to kind of feel out your audience. And basically, the idea is, like, how much do I want to talk right now? And then how much do you actually want to know? So you have to kind of feel out the audience and decide how much you want to say. My first sort of litmus test here is just to say computers. I do computers. I don't know what your first one is, but this is my go-to, computers. And I kind of gauge the reaction and say, like, OK, do you want to know any more? Actually, I have another one that today, this next slide is a confessional. I've used this phrase in parties and stuff, and I thought it was good, and that's I'm sorry for. It's not good or funny, but I have said this in real life, and that is, yes, somebody has to cloud the cloud. This is a phrase that I have used in real life in social situations, as sort of like a short, like, yeah, this is the stuff that I do. I'm sorry about that, and I'm no longer saying it anymore by confessing it to you. I'm never doing that again. So what I tend to do here is I sort of work down a level, and try to figure out what people actually want to know about what I do. So I can say software, I'll put in cloud software, internet infrastructure software, and then sort of actually working my way up to what I would say in this crowd, which is cloud infrastructure automation. So at this family reunion, I had a distant aunt who was totally coming with me on this journey. I was like, computers. She's like, what kind? And the software. And turns out she coordinates a construction crew for a living. And so she got the infrastructure metaphor. She was like, oh, infrastructure, great. So by the end of our conversation, she was like, so all these big tech companies have have pipes, like digital pipes. And then when they leak, they have to call you. And I was like, I mean, pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty close. But the exercise of trying to describe what I do in that context got me thinking about this overall idea of taking a complicated idea and needing to break it down and describe it in different ways to different audiences. This is something we have to do all the time, and especially with complicated ideas. And that is the thing that we are doing all the time in Terraform. Terraform has a lot of complicated ideas behind it. It has a lot of angles by which you can approach it. And we're always trying to tell the Terraform story in ways that different people can understand it. So that's what I want to do with you today, is go through kind of a little bit of an exercise and figure out just what we can say about what does Terraform do from a couple of different layers, from a couple of different angles. And my goal here is essentially to give you a little bit more of an intuitive understanding of the ideas and concepts surrounding Terraform and underlying Terraform. And as sort of a meta goal, I think I hope that you'll see just the benefit of this exercise in breaking down a complicated idea, because I think it's just a really useful practice. So let's see what we can do. Computers. There you go. This is where we start. Terraform computers. I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, that's a good place to start as any. There's really not much information you get out of that. I guess if you didn't know at all what Terraform was, computers is a good place to start. But let's talk about a more useful place to start, provisioning. So Terraform is a provisioning tool. What does provisioning mean? Well, it means making stuff, right? Where there was once nothing, now there is something. So this is a good start as a concept. Terraform is a provisioning tool. That is the thing it does. This is true. What's nice about the early high levels is that it can be very true, but not tell you all of the information, right? So This, in the context of provisioning, we tell this story about how computers have become clouds now. You know this story all very well, right? Provisioning used to be, opening a box and putting it in a rack for a server. Now provisioning is an API call. So Terraform does provisioning. OK, does Terraform provision cloud resources? Yeah, it does do that. But what does it mean that Terraform also can provision a GitHub team and like a Google Calendar event? I mean, it can do both of these things. If you're not aware about this, it can absolutely do both of these things. So it's a little bit more complicated than just simple like cloud infrastructure provisioning, although it is that. So let's go another layer deeper and get to a layer that I like to talk about in Terraform. Terraform is a declarative to imperative mapping engine. There's a mouthful. So what does that mean? On the left-hand side, you can see we've got sort of a Terraform declaration, and on the right-hand side, we've got equivalent API commands. I think it's important to have an intuitive understanding of this sort of declarative to imperative mapping, the paradigm shift that Terraform does, because it helps click Terraform like for individuals who really want to explore it more and use it. So let's figure this out a little bit. Let's try to make sense of this. So APIs and GUIs, generally speaking, when you're interacting with either a GUI or an API, you have an idea in your head about what you want to complete. You have a concept that you're attempting to map into a set of commands, clicks or API calls, to create something that you have in your head. And so this is what I mean. So if you look at the bottom here, the idea of here's like a service in AWS. You have a load balance service in AWS in your head, but you have to make imperative commands in order to be able to tell AWS what to do. And so Terraform, as a declarative to imperative mapping engine, allows you to describe the thing that is in your head directly into a configuration file, and it is the thing that takes care of the declarative to imperative mapping. This is just a really a simple way of describing one of the key foundational concepts behind Terraform. Cool, OK. So let's put that on a stack. Terraform's a provisioning tool. It's a declarative to imperative mapping engine. What else? So now that we have declarative to imperative, we can add on this concept of idempotent and convergent, another mouthful. But once you put it into context, you can see how it makes sense. So the concept of idempotent is you can take one operation and repeat it and get the same result. And from that, you get convergence. You can repeat Terraform applies, given the same config, and you will get the same result. And this allows Terraform to manage drift and anything that might have changed in the resources under management. And so we get these fancy words that really describe properties of what Terraform can do. Cool, that goes on our stack too. Terraform is a provisioning tool that is a declarative to imperative mapping engine, giving idempotent and convergent properties of its operations. That's a really complicated sentence, right? But now we've stacked up all of these ideas, so I hope they fit together a little bit better in your head. And so here now, we have enough of the foundational concepts to say infrastructure as code and understand a little bit better what it means. What is infrastructure as code referencing here? There's plenty more to infrastructure as code. It borrows a ton of concepts. And I'm not going to go into the details of infrastructure as code here. Suffice it to say, infrastructure as code is a strategy. My definition is it's a strategy for managing complexity in which we borrow the practices, tools, tricks, processes from application development as they capture complexity as code, and we borrow them in managing infrastructure as infrastructure increasingly becomes software. That's all I'll say about that. But the idea here is infrastructure as code fits on this stack. It's a set of concepts that sort of all relate to each other, all describe in increasing detail what goes into Terraform. Cool. OK, so there's a stack of ideas that underlie Terraform. Let's change angles now. Let's go sideways. Let's talk about sociotechnical systems. So this is cool. I will go on and on about this. I promise I won't. But the sociotechnical systems is actually a field of study and a body of knowledge that has existed since the World War II era in the study of coal miners and their processes of mining coal. Basically, the idea is very simple. It's in the name. The idea is that it is important when optimizing like a goal-oriented group, like a set of application developers trying to produce an application, a company trying to make revenue, any system that involves people and technology, if you are trying to optimize it, you can't optimize one or the other. You have to think about them together. You have to think about the people and the pewters. So in our context, this is really closely related to one of HashiCorp's core tenets, workflows, not technologies. We sort of invert the natural tendency of us as engineers in our tenet. We're automatically going to think about the technologies. And so in the tenet, we say, OK, make sure we're thinking about workflows. And so this is kind of how we lean into making sure we're considering sociotechnical systems and that we're optimizing the whole story. From this, you get pragmatism. You get how do we build tools that people actually use. You get user empathy. You get user experience. And so this is an important concept. So with that sort of in mind, let's talk about some workflows that have to do with Terraform. This isn't Terraform. This is actually just a pretty basic application development cycle, about as basic as it gets. Write code, test it, deploy it. It's a circle. You do more. Write more code, test more code, deploy it. Very familiar. Very familiar also to Terraform. Here's Terraform's. Write, plan, apply. This is intentional. This is infrastructure as code in action. The core workflow that surrounds Terraform is very similar to an application development workflow. This is the way that we've designed Terraform such that we're paralleling all of the ideas that exist in application management because it helps us solve problems. Now, this is the simplest expression of the Terraform workflow, and it quickly gets more complicated. Just like provisioning is the simplest expression of Terraform's concept as a tool, and it can get more complicated. So let's see how that gets more complicated. Oh, yes, and we call this the core Terraform workflow. I'll use that sort of in our stack as we go down. So here's a wrinkle. It's really common to write and plan in a cycle before you apply. As you're writing Terraform configuration, you're running plan over and over again, but before you decide to say, OK, this looks good, this is what I want to do. So write plan, write plan. This is one of the things that remote plan, as a new feature, gets back. So you'll see this gets more complicated as we add in layers. And we really like this write plan cycle because it's tight. It's a tight feedback loop. And it's one that we got back in Terraform Enterprise with remote plan that we're really excited about. But in real life, unless you're writing throwaway configuration, you're interacting with some sort of VCS system. You're going to save your code somewhere. So you have some extra steps here, right? Between the plan and apply, you're going to commit. Between the apply and the next time you write code, you're probably going to pull to get changes. And really, so that's VCS stored config. Let's put that in as a layer. And but really, the idea here is like only as simple as this if you're working by yourself. If you're working in a team, you're actually probably using branches, which adds a couple more steps to this workflow. You're probably committing to a feature branch. You're probably making a pull request. Why are you doing that? Well, it's so that team that can review the changes so that you can figure out, you can evolve your configuration together. You can catch mistakes. So team code review adds another wrinkle to this core Terraform workflow in real life when we actually practice it for our daily jobs. What's interesting about the team workflow, too, is it's not just the team. Now we have two different kinds of actors. This half, this 2/3, is what the individual does. And then the other side, oh, and by the way, the individual is still doing these tight loops as they are working on their configuration before they push it. And the team is doing the review part. So it's kind of a handoff between the individual and then the team. Note that we're still right alongside of the application development cycle. This is the same workflow that you use for application code. So let's talk about what gets specific to Terraform. Well, one thing that the team's going to want as they review that pull request is they're probably going to want to see the plan. This is a common thing. You're reviewing configuration. You want to see the output of the plan. What does Terraform say it wants to do? That's going to help me make sure that your change is going to do what it says it does. So one practice teams will add here, it's a lightweight practice, is just have the author copy and paste. They'll run Terraform plan from their laptop. They'll copy and paste the output into the pull request so the team can review it. That works. Maybe it's something you want to automate, though. So you'll pull in a CI system, and you'll say, actually, we're going to have a CI system on every pull request, run plan, give that feedback to the team so that they can appropriately review the pull request. And once you have the plan in CI, why not put apply in CI? So at this stage, putting plan and apply in CI, this is a really nice milestone. This is what we see teams using Terraform doing all over the place. And it works pretty well. In fact, that's kind of what Atlantis does. This is roughly the workflow that Atlantis provides, is pull request feedback and centralized apply. Actually, though, Atlanta switches this apply and merge steps in its current iteration. We're talking about that. I want to switch them back. So we're going to try to figure out, get to a consistent workflow. But it is absolutely the Terraform sort of like in a team workflow. Oh, yeah, and we're working on sort of centralizing things. Remember that? Yeah. Go sign up if you're interested in learning how we do that. Obviously, Terraform Enterprise nails this workflow as well. This is part of the core Terraform workflow as expressed in Terraform Enterprise. Terraform Enterprise adds on some things that supplement this workflow for Terraform at scale. We'll get to that in a second. So here is a set of workflows that are a set of ideas underlying the core Terraform workflow as you get increasingly sort of robust in a team. Cool, so now let's talk about scaling Terraform. So we've got some concepts that we've stacked up. We've got some workflows that we've stacked up. What about when you start really investing in this, you start using Terraform more? What increases? Well, maybe you have more teams. Maybe you're going to have more configuration, probably have more infrastructure, more chaos. Everybody loves chaos. How do we attack this generalized problem of chaos? I don't know, that's our jobs, I guess. This is what we're here for. Generally speaking, we're looking for more maturity. How do we mature the processes around these workflows in order to control for the problems of scale? A couple of ideas to throw around here. You have to evolve your socio-technical systems. So we have to remember that there are people involved and there is technology involved. We can supplement the problems of scale with technology, but we have to remember the people as well. Which is really just to say another way of saying evolve your workflows. So, before we dive into the workflows, so I'm staying at workflows level. If you're looking for like the mechanics of evolving a repo full of Terraform code, this is a great talk to watch. Nikki Watt gave this last year at Hashi Days London. It's called Evolving Your Terraform, and it goes through a single repository, through like a single file of Terraform, through to splitting it up into directories, splitting it up into modules, splitting those modules up into separate repositories. It's a great talk if you're looking for like the concrete specifics of the kinds of ideas we're talking about here. So let's talk workflows, though. Let's go back to our core Terraform workflow. How is this going to scale? So if you're going to have more teams writing more configuration, you're going to scale the write step. You've got more writing happening. And here's where I get to pull in a concept I've been obsessed with lately, and that's conceptual compression. This is something that anybody who has been hanging around me for the last 6 months is annoyed by now because I don't stop talking about it. It's really just, so it's been popularized by DHH, the founder of Rails, who it's essentially just another way of talking about abstraction as a utility, as a core utility of the things we do. But what I love about it is it's user-oriented. It's the idea that generally speaking, as we make progress in managing complexity, we can compress down the ideas necessary to get work done. So in DevOps, this is a huge problem, right? You have to know so many tools, you need to know so many ideas in order to get your job done. And the idea of sort of how do we find the seams where the useful enough abstractions will always be leaky, but useful enough abstractions exist such that people above that layer of abstraction can get more done without having to learn everything that we know. To me, that's one of the core tenets of the DevOps movement, is to find these seams. So you have to do this if you're scaling Terraform. Why? Terraform expertise is not universally distributed. Just like anything, it's distributed in a bell curve. We sit up here. Generally speaking, the folks who are in this room are probably sitting up here. The people who are experts in Terraform. And we start to, as in scale, we start to call these people producers. These are the people writing Terraform configuration and slinging around in their application. We class the majority of Terraform users into consumers. And I'll show you how these fit together. But you'll notice I didn't put the low tail there. To me, the idea is that eventually we should get to a point where there are people who have very little Terraform expertise that can still get the benefits out of Terraform. A lot of you are doing this in your organizations by being a service team, by launching a PaaS. So the consumers here are still people who are going to be slinging around Terraform. And the relationship between producers and consumers lives in the Terraform module. The Terraform module is our tool for establishing seams by which we can share ideas in Terraform with other people without them having to know the underlying details of how something's implemented. So, easy example. Maybe you got somebody who knows the basics of Terraform, and they can launch a company blog on a subdomain of your company website. all they have to do is like copy paste those 3 lines. They know how to check it in, and the producers know all of the details that go into the infrastructure that launches a company blog. This is a simple example, but it's a really powerful tool. The ability to draw a seam, you choose these seams for your company. And I think it's really important to understand that that exercise is a socio-technical system question, right? You have to think about the people involved, you have to think about the technology involved, and figure out where those seams are. So here's the core Terraform workflow producer edition, where you're doing write, plan, apply, but generally speaking, what you're applying is throwaway infrastructure such that you can destroy it and then publish a module. This is something that producers do, and they upload it to a registry. It could be our registry, it could be the public registry, it could be the Terraform Enterprise registry, it could be a set of repositories in your VCS system. The registry here is more of just an idea than it is a specific technology, a place for modules. And then the consumer side of this is the idea that somebody could go and look at those modules, browse for like, oh yeah, what do I want? I want a PHP application in a test environment, and be able to launch that using Terraform without needing to know the details of, for instance, networking and security groups. So this is how we scale writing. One of the concept generally is what we talk about as producer-consumer workflows. And it's, for us, we think of it as centralizing around the Terraform registry. Lastly, I'll talk about plan, scaling plan. What happens when you have a lot of people reviewing plans? Manual review fails at scale. Humans are not great at reviewing tons of changes manually. So you have to start looking at automated review. And for us, that means policy as code. So this is what the core Terraform workflow looks like when you're starting to implement automated review of plans. You're inserting some sort of policy check in here. And what's cool about this is the idea that you can actually separate duties. You can have folks who are writing policies that publish them up such that the infrastructure folks just need to meet the policies. They don't necessarily care what they are. They just know that as their plans come out, they will get the feedback about what they need to meet as they scale, as they start. It allows your infrastructure folks to have more flexibility within the needs of the organization. So collectively, we call these workflows governance workflows. So altogether, the core Terraform workflow, producer and consumer workflows, and governance workflows are concepts that we throw around in the Terraform team as we think about scaling Terraform. So I hope what I've been able to do here today is give you just a little bit of an ideas tour of the world of Terraform. We went deep, we went sideways, we went up, we went all sorts of directions. And again, I hope that you've gotten a little bit more of an intuitive understanding of some of the underlying ideas of Terraform. Because after all, somebody has to cloud the cloud.